Well, this obviously is Mike's Type 21 that he purchased on eBay, and it came with a number of challenges, to say the least. Again, let's just ground ourselves back to reality. Most of the folks that sell on eBay are doing it to turn a quick buck. They're not doing it because they share our passion of vintage sewing machines or even have any knowledge about what vintage sewing machines are. Typically they brush them off with a little bit of polish, maybe drop a few drops of oil in the machine, and that's the extent of their restoration. That's not going to work for us. So when we got Mike's machine, you might remember this back piece. I'll kind of zoom in on it as best as I can, where it's broken on top. That piece has been replaced. So it's like it's, basically never happened. Also some other challenges with Mike's machine. You can't really see it through the plastic very well, but that happens to be the bobbin carrier that was in the machine. The band that controls tension that would regulate that top stitch is totally wonked up. That's my new word today, is wonked up. So I had to replace Mike's bobbin carrier. And the same thing true of the upper tension. Clean that sucker completely up, and it still would not regulate the tension properly. So a lot of challenges with that lock stitch. So I had to take one of my machines from my personal collection and take that upper tension control out of there so that we would have a nice looking stitch like these right over here. So these are just some of the stitches that I generated on Mike's machine from cam A, and I believe it was cam B. It's only a small sampling, and we're going to sew a couple of those off cam A again today on live video. And I've got to give credit where credit is due. His Majesty the King was obviously present during this entire process and provided a number of great tips on what I needed to do. So Your Majesty, thank you. I can't take full credit for it. You obviously were a big part of that, as was one of the original Swedish machines, Your Highness, that came out of your factory. This one right here, which is almost a carbon copy of Mike's, and that is in fact where we got that rear piece, and also where we got that upper tension as well. You can see this one hasn't gone through much of a cleaning process yet. Also, I wanted to show you, you might remember that Mike's machine has a very unique bobbin winding system on the side of it. This is a model, same model as Mike's. It's a Type 21, same series even, but they decided that this winding system was causing people a little bit of a headache, because if you want to access the low gear on this, you literally have to take that knob right there, turn it counterclockwise, and remove it from the machine to engage the bobbin winder. Beyond that, you also have to put a bobbin on that bobbin winder as well while you're utilizing the slow gear. If you don't, that pulley system by design locks up so that nothing happens with the machine. So you can only imagine why they elected to change out that bobbin winder with a later model of the Type 21 in the same series. But they probably got so many complaints and so many angry people saying, this is a pain in the butt. Yeah, you heard it on this channel. I said butt. So they ended up going to the bobbin winder, which is consistent with pretty much all of the green machines. Come on, camera. Hello. Pretty much consistent with all the green machines, where you're simply going to have to access that slow gear, you're just going to have to pull this bobbin winder out. You're sewing in slow gear. Try saying that a couple times really fast. And then when you're done wanting to utilize that slow gear feature, which again takes the machine from full power down to 1/5 of the power, so you can really have a lot of control. You just push it back in again. So that's a lot easier, a lot less frustrating than what they had originally. And it just dawned on me, I need to go over and grab a bobbin real quick, an extra bobbin, if I can find one. I've got to grab an extra bobbin so that I can utilize the slow gear on Mike's machine. So again, you can have the same make and model. It's a Husqvarna Viking Type 21 from the early 1950s. Then you can have another model that's even newer than that, or actually what I meant to say is actually older. Mike's machine is older than the other one that I took the parts off of. And this one has that original style bobbin winding system. So I also wanted to, for the folks that don't do Facebook, I wanted to real quick just take you over to my computer and share some of the progress shots that I shared with all of my Facebook friends, so you can see the different steps that we had to take Mike's machine through. And see if I can just start clicking through them. And all of you that are on Facebook, you've already seen these. But this is part of that bobbin winding system, and if you can see through the camera, that thing was really gunked up and really in a messy state, so I had to totally disassemble it. That's part of the same system. That has nothing to do with it. Ignore that. That was a recent picture I took of that Singer Bakelite foot control that came with a machine for a customer, Peter's machine, and he was using that with his Type 21, which is a no-no, because that foot control, if I go back to that picture real quick, that foot control is only rated at 0.7 amps, and that motor is rated on the Husqvarna at 1.5 amps. Well, you do the math. You're looking at a gap point of 0.8 amps basically, and that foot control could catch fire. So, at any rate, back to Mike's machine. This is the pulley off of the motor. It had all kinds of gunky, sticky, messy stuff on it. Had to go through that and clean that all up. More shots of the bobbin winder. Some real tiny pieces in that sucker, which have spring releases that allow you to have that automatic feature. That little spring back here real quick lets you have that automatic feature, so when you slide a bobbin on, it's going to disengage that clutch automatically. That's what that spring feature in there does, that spring assembly. So there's a much happier pulley that comes off of the motor, clean, ready to put a new belt on, and ready to get the job done. More shots of the cleaning process for that bobbin winder on Mike's machine. There it is again. You can see some of the pieces are off, including the drive shaft that goes in the middle of that bobbin winding assembly. You can see the gunk right there. I mean, that stuff was just sticky. It almost looked like chewing gum, but black licorice style chewing gum. Again, you can just see all the gunk on there. You also have to clean all of the cogged pieces as well, which is a real meticulous, time-consuming process, because that's really going to make the big difference. And there you've got a wonderful, happy bobbin winding system. Clean track in there as well, which was all gunked up. All of these components having been disassembled, and it's ready to go to work to do what it does. Just more shots, and some of these are going to be out of sequence. You're going to see the clean portion before the dirty portion. That's just the way they upload to Facebook. And just to go back to this one right here again, you can see that 1.5 amps, which you definitely do not want to use a traditional Singer Bakelite foot control with. And there's that pulley before it got cleaned up. So again, some of these are out of sequence. Just all the components, the parts that had to be cleaned. And there were a lot of pictures before this, I know, that I posted about Mike's machine as well. If you do Facebook, you've seen them. If you don't, you may never see them. Excuse me. There are a number of lubrication points as well within that bobbin winding assembly, and you need to know which ones to lubricate and which ones not to lubricate. So there again is Peter's machine that I shared with you folks. He's got the 0.7 amp Singer Bakelite foot control with a 1.5 amp original Swedish motor. No, 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 no. Please don't do that. All right. Oh, Doris Day. So these are some more shots. They're not going to be... oh, this is a circle. We went full circle. Never mind. So there are a lot more progress shots that I'm guessing that Mike saw on Facebook, and a lot of you that do Facebook, you saw it as well. So much work had to go into Mike's Type 21. And again, this was an extra step that, you know, if you get a Swedish Beauty from me, you're not going to have to worry about that. All these steps that I've taken Mike's machine through, which I think I counted conservatively about 87 steps, and that doesn't include my regular cleaning and tuning process. That's on top of it that I had to take Mike's machine through. So the final result now is we can enjoy a Swedish Beauty as it should be. So I'm going to go ahead and go down to the needle. I might add a little bit of music to this if I can get back to the other screen. Let's see here, because we have to have a little bit of royal music, you know, when we're working with a Swedish Beauty. Let's see if this works. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to sew off on Mike's very happy Swedish Beauty now. Let's see here. I think I will do... Why don't we just launch with some U.S. Army grade canvas. And I'm just going to... I probably will do maybe a zigzag? I don't know. So here's 2 layers we're starting with. Fold it once. We're up to 4. Fold it again. We're all the way up to 8. And one of the things that people love so much about Swedish Beauties is you very seldom have to struggle very much with getting something underneath that presser foot. The clearance is phenomenal. So I'm going to go ahead and change my needle from a straight to a zigzag. At least I think it'll be a zigzag, because here's the thing. I've got cam A in there right now, so we might get something totally different, which is fine. All right, so here we go with 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas. And it always helps to get your foot all the way on the foot control. So there's our lock stitch. You know what, as my friends in the South say, it just don't get no better than that. And here's our top stitch there. So absolutely spectacular. And I can say with absolute conviction that Mike's machine didn't sew like this when it came from that seller on eBay. Not even close. All right, so I'm setting that U.S. Army grade canvas to the side. And now we're going to put a single layer of leather underneath the presser foot, because I want to lay down some stitches off of this cam A just so you can see it on leather. Let me see. And again, those of you that follow me very faithfully already know this to be true, but every time you change from one cam stitch to another on these vintage Husqvarnas, you want to turn your stitch width all the way down to 0, and then you can bring it all the way back to 4 again if you'd like. So that's what I'm doing off camera right now. Actually, I'll stay on, I'm on stitch number 5 on cam A right now, and we'll zip down. That's the one that we basically just sewed off on that US Army grade canvas. So here we go. The ease of sewing on this machine now is just ridiculous. Alright, get that thread back in place. This is the one we just sewed off, which is identical to the one we just laid on the US Army grade canvas. Look at the lock as well. It's absolutely perfect. So now, what I'm going to do, after I clip my threads, because I've gotten kind of in the last couple of videos, I've gotten a little bit lazy with not clipping my threads, and it feels really weird. It does. Alright, I'm going to get my material back in place, which is a single layer of genuine cowhide. And I don't need this much leather, for goodness sakes, for 5 stitches, really. But it's what I cut. I think I originally planned to basically fold it in half, but I didn't do that. So, okay, so what we're going to do now is stitch number 2 on cam A. Here we go. And maybe what I should do, excuse me, no, I'll wait to do that. I'll wait to do that on a different material. I was going to try the slow gear on this, but we'll do that on a later stitch off. Otherwise, I've described to you how it already works. So, all right, stitch number 2, cam A. Here we go. Oh, my arm's in the way. Listen as well to how that machine runs now. It just is absolutely spectacular. Oh, you know what else I better do? Duh! I forgot to shorten my stitch length. I'm doing that off camera right now from 4 down to about 0.5, because what we just sewed, and you can hardly tell that's what we sewed, is a blind hem. Maybe I'll run down that again now that I've shortened it, so you can see how just making a modest adjustment on that stitch length can change the look of that stitch dramatically. Let's clip that one as well. So even though I didn't really do what I wanted to do, you can see there is our blind hem. There's kind of a stretch zigzag. Still a really good looking stitch, both on the lock and on the top. So now we've moved the stitch length from 4 down to about 0.5. Let's see what we get now. And we're sewing exactly the same stitch, stitch number 4 on cam A. Here we go. Well, needless to say, now that I have my stitch length at the appropriate length, that really changes the look of that stitch dramatically. Let me get my thread back into place, and while I'm clipping these threads, you can kind of see through the camera the profound difference. And I've said it in videos before, simply by goofing around with the stitch length or the stitch width, you can get an entirely different outcome as far as the way that stitch presents. You can see the one on the bottom is the one that we just sewed. The stitch width is at 4, as was this one, but we moved the stitch length where on this one right above it we had it at 4. We moved it down to about 0.5. Those are the same stitches, but you can hardly tell it because of the way they present now that we modified the stitch length. Pretty cool, huh? So let me get my leather back in place. Again, a single layer of genuine cowhide. And you know what? Compared to some of the sew-offs I do, this is a breeze, obviously, for this Type 21 Mike's machine, which has a 1.5 amp motor. But you know what? When it comes to, give me a second here. There we go. When it comes to leather's an unpredictable thing. You can get some really, really surprising outcomes, to the good and to the bad. I'm going to move some of my parts out of the way. When you're sewing leather. So you can't take for granted that even a single layer, which is probably about 2 to 3 ounces, can't throw you a curveball sometimes. So I never take anything for granted. All right, so again, right now in Mike's machine we have cam A, and we're on stitch number 3. Here we go. And folks, just so you know, I am just a fraction of the way down on that. I'm only a fraction of the way down right now on the foot control. It looks like my bobbin, I wound this one kind of hastily. Looks like my bobbin is stuck. I'm going to take off this extension arm real quick so I can access the bobbin area. Let me set this off to the side. So I think we have a little bit of a snag in there. Let me take that out. It's okay to see this, by the way. It's okay to see that we sometimes, like I said, you can encounter things unexpectedly. So let me widen my shot a little bit and we'll fix this together. And it may be that that winder, let's see here. It may be that that winder did not get that thread evenly. And it warns you in the manual all the time about that. But you know, an expert like me, I don't need to worry about that. Well, maybe I do now. So, when you're putting the bobbin back in, and this is a great tip from Mike as well because it can be done wrong, you want to have that thread coming over the top. You just slide it into your bobbin case, get it into that groove, and then just pull it down so it's feeding again. Then we'll go ahead and just pop it back in, and then we're just going to rotate our balance wheel to the front to pull that thread back up again. And then we just need to, we can use our clips to sweep it back to the rear again. Once we actually get our clips in between, that is. Okay. So if that ever happens, sometimes it'll, when you wind it, the thread will kind of get snagged up a little bit on the bobbin in there. And you will sometimes encounter where the thread doesn't feed as it should. And that's the easiest way to fix it, as you just saw right there. All right, so back to what we were working on. And it looks like the stitch that we just did, which is stitch number 3 again on cam A, that one right there. Really a cool stitch. I like the look of that. It's actually almost like a 5-point stitch because you can see all the separate little strike points where that needle's hitting the same area twice. So what we've done so far to accurately reflect what the cam generated is we have basically a zigzag here. Originally I said a zigzag stretch, but that's not correct. We've got a blind hem with a really long stitch length. We then shorten it up, and then we have an actual stretch stitch that's going to be stitch number 3 on cam A. So we have just a couple more stitches we're going to run off once I get my material back in place. And I'll adjust my camera shot again. Of course, that's not a horrible camera shot, is it? And then as I move my arm back and forth in front of the camera, it's less likely to blur. So I think we'll just leave it like that, and I can always zoom in again. So let's see, I got to zero out my stitch width. I'll go ahead and go to stitch number 2 now. Bring my stitch width back to 4. Again, we're still at about between 0.5 to 1 on stitch length. So this again is going to be stitch number 2 on cam A. Here we go. All right. I like this stitch a lot, and I probably could have shortened it up even a little bit more, but I almost call this kind of a builder's stitch because it has that look of the different mounds, almost like you're looking at, let me flip it like this, almost like you're looking at a mountain range or something like that going across. I just think it's a really neat stitch, and I'm sure there's a technical name for it, which I don't know. And you can see our lock stitch on the back is spectacular as well. That was one of the main issues we had with Mike's machine before I ended up replacing that upper tension control. Boy, I was really battling that sucker. So again, just to summarize, did a zigzag, blind hem, we shortened the stitch length, did another blind hem, stretched stitch, which I oftentimes refer to as kind of a modified zigzag, and then we have this builder's type stitch, which I love. I love that stitch a lot. All right, so let me get my material back in place, and we'll just sew without that extension arm right now. And I'll go ahead and zero out my stitch width, take us to the final stitch, take us back to 4, and here we go. Oh, my scallop. Love scallops, don't you? Alright, so let me go ahead and clip that. And clip this. Get my threads back in place, because we're almost at the finish line as far as sew-offs on Mike's machine. But we're not quite there yet. Alright. So again, excuse me, you can see in the shot our zigzag, blind hem again, stretch stitch, our builder stitch as I refer to it, and then our scallop, and all of those are looking just absolutely spectacular, as is the lock stitch as well. So that's it. That's all of Cam A that you see here, and we kind of did that blind hem twice. So again, just to remind you, between Cam A and Cam B, and Mike also has Cam C, there's a lot of stitches that you can play around with on this Type 21 from the early 1950s. Again, just because I bumbled over my words, the machine that I got a number of parts for Mike's machine was a newer Type 21 in the same series. Mike's machine is one of the original Type 21s in that series, and the way you can tell that again is the bobbin winder is very, very different. So I think what I'll do now is I'm going to change my shot over to the bobbin winder and show you what we have to do to access that slow stitch. And this again will give you a clue as to why they ended up changing it to the more contemporary version of a bobbin winder, because this thing's a little bit of a pain in the neck. So I'm going to move the camera over there, and I'm running out of time here. I better hurry up or I'm going to end up the camera will basically quit on me. So what we have to do to access the slow stitch on Mike's machine, let me move this cord down, is we literally have to turn this knob and remove it. And it'll tell you right in the owner's manual you have to do that. So once we remove it, again, you do not want to push on the foot control right now, because that is going to basically, that bobbin assembly right now by design is locked up. So we have to take the knob out, which we've already done, and then we have to add a bobbin to it to free up that gear so that it will actually turn. Now we have access to the slow gear, which obviously you can see it's a little bit more complicated than the more contemporary version. So I'm just going to clip our 8 layers of US Army grade canvas, and at this point we're going to go ahead and sew using the slow gear. And I'll come out on my shot a little bit and also go over here. There we go. Kind of do it at this distance. And you'll be able to hear the motor is constrained. Again, we're only running at 1/5 of full speed. And I'm going to go ahead and zip down this other side, and I'll have to adjust my settings here. I'm going to go from a 4 setting on the width down to 0, and I'm going to go ahead and move back to, let's see here, move back to the original setting on there, and I'm going to extend my stitch length to a 4. Okay, so here we go, sewing with the slow gear as this machine is set up to use it. So here we go. There you go. So let me pull this out. And I'm going to go ahead and let me zoom back over there. You can see this in the shot, I believe. I have my camera screen pointed the wrong way. Let me zoom in on that first. So there you can see the straight stitch on the left there that we just laid down using the slow gear. It's absolutely spectacular. And the original zigzag style stitch that we did on those 8 layers of US Army grade canvas. Now we need to put the machine back together. And again, this is by design. I'm not making it up, folks. So what we have to do now is we have to remove the bobbin the bobbin from the bobbin winder, and then we have to put our knob back into place. And I've got to block the camera just for a second so I can see how I'm lined up here. Oh, good Lord. Give me a second, folks. Okay. All right, let me get out of the way. So we slide it in, push it in, turn it, come on, and you'll turn it to the rear of the machine, which is clockwise. So now we're back to a regular speed again using Mike's machine. And I don't know that we're going to have time for me to show it to you because, as you know, I've got a wonky camera and it tends to quit right around 36 minutes. And we're really close to that mark right now. So let me get this back in place and see if for a final time, just to show you the transition that we made. Let me turn my screen around too, because I really can't see a thing that you're seeing. Oh, you're way the heck over there still. So you can see what we did. We put the knob back in. Now we're going to go back over by here. There we go. So once again, let me clip these threads real quick. Once again, on the 8 layers of US Army grade canvas, we did originally the zigzag, then we just did the straight stitch, and we did it with the slow gear. Now we're going to lay down one final set of stitches on the right side here next to the other 2 stitches we already laid down, and we're going to sew at regular speed. There we go. Now I can see what you're seeing. So I'm going to first of all move my stitch width to 4. I'm going to go ahead and move our cam setting on cam A. And I don't remember which stitch that is. I think it was stitch number 2. And then we're going to lay down a decorative stitch next to these other 2 stitches, if we don't run out of time. All right, here we go. Oh, I looked off to the side. Oh, and I also forgot to change my my stitch length back. That's my building block one, and you can see how wonky it, well, especially over there, you see how wonky it looks because I didn't shorten that stitch length again. We were at 4 instead of at between 0.5 to 1. So, all right. So, at any rate, Mike's Swedish Beauty is very happy right now, and I'm so glad that Mike elected to, again, he purchased the machine on eBay, and then instead of having the seller send it to him, he sent it directly to the workshop. And any of you out there can do that. You can very easily make a purchase elsewhere and then send it to the workshop, and I will take care of you. So let me do real quick, if I can, see if we don't run out of time. Real quick, we will put on some other type of fun music. There we go. That's pretty, isn't it? So again, we went from, number one, the King's very sage advice. King, I'm sorry, you're out of focus there, sir. All right. And we went to this machine from my personal collection that I've used to help a number of other machines out. And the result is, we once again have a Swedish Beauty of beauty, grandeur, and certainly technical expertise. I'm loving this music right now. How about you? So Mike, thanks again for entrusting your Swedish Beauty that you purchased on eBay to my workshop, and I am